$150,000 saved for retirement at 62. If you run that through almost any online calculator, you'll get a reassuring answer. 4% withdrawals, about $500 a month from your portfolio, and 25 years of runway. The numbers line up, on paper. But there's a variable those calculators skip. A $20,000 roof replacement, not a flood, not a medical crisis, just the roof that's been on your house for 20 years, consumes 40 months of those $500 withdrawals in a single bill. 40 months. Before you've replaced a car, seen a dentist, or had one market correction. Most Canadians with $150,000 at 62 think their biggest problem is running out of money slowly. The real problem is running out of money fast, because of something almost no retirement tool accounts for. We're going to walk through exactly why the smoothest looking retirement plan can crack in year 2 and what it actually takes to stop that from happening. Not another savings product. A specific reserve, separate from your portfolio, separate from your monthly budget, built to absorb the shocks that every standard calculator quietly leaves out. If you're a Canadian homeowner who wants the honest version of this math, hit subscribe. This is what we do here every week. Dan and Lisa are both 62, married, and they own their home free and clear in a mid-sized Ontario city. Dan spent most of his working years earning around $55,000 a year. Lisa worked part-time through the kids' school years. Together, they've put away $150,000, split between an RRSP and a TFSA, and they have modest CPP entitlements coming when they turn 65. By most measures, they're doing exactly what Canadian couples in their situation are supposed to do. That's where the plan runs into trouble. At $500 a month from their portfolio, a $20,000 roof replacement costs Dan and Lisa 40 months of withdrawals in a single bill. Not gradually, not spread across a rough patch. In one shot. That's the first number most retirement calculators never include, and it's the one that matters most. Standard retirement planning treats spending as a smooth, predictable line. Income comes in, money goes out, year after year at roughly the same pace. But if you own a home in your 60s, your actual spending looks more like a staircase. You hold steady for a while, and then you hit a step. The roof, the furnace, the car that finally can't be kept going. The dental work your provincial plan won't cover. Each one is a sharp, unavoidable jump that the average calculator never accounts for. A 2025 Statistics Canada survey on housing experiences found that 68% of homeowners aged 60 to 69 reported a major home repair cost in the previous 5 years, with those repairs averaging between $12,000 and $18,000. That's not a worst-case scenario. It's the statistical description of what it means to own a home in your 60s in Canada. I've spent over a decade working with Canadian pre-retirees, and I've watched couples in their early 60s see a perfectly structured retirement plan unravel in under 2 years because of a single home repair. Not because they were reckless, not because they hadn't saved enough, because the repair was real, the calculator was smooth, and nobody had told them those two things don't add up the same way. The problem runs deeper than the calculator itself. Financial planning tools are designed by institutions that benefit when you stay invested. They model average returns and average spending. That works well when your expenses are predictable. The moment you face a large irregular cost, a roof, a furnace, a vehicle replacement, the model breaks in ways that don't get advertised. Your house has a specific age, specific systems, and a real list of things that will need replacing on a schedule that has nothing to do with your withdrawal rate. That's not a risk factor, it's a timeline. If you're a Canadian homeowner with $150,000 to $300,000, wondering whether your plan can hold up against real life, hit subscribe, because we're about to build the one tool your calculator forgot. So if the staircase pattern is the real spending model for homeowners in their 60s, what does a plan built around it actually look like? The answer is what I call the Lumpy Expense Reserve. The concept is simple. You hold $15,000 to $20,000 in a dedicated cash buffer, completely separate from your investment portfolio and completely outside your 4% withdrawal calculation. This reserve has one job: to absorb the unpredictable housing, vehicle, and health costs that every homeowner in their 60s eventually faces. It is not your emergency fund. It is not part of your monthly income math. It sits apart, doing nothing most of the time, until the roof needs replacing or the furnace gives out. The amount matters, but the location matters just as much. Consider what happens when Dan and Lisa need $20,000 for a roof and they pull it from the RRSP. That withdrawal counts as taxable income. At a marginal tax rate of around 25%, they immediately lose $5,000 to tax. And if they're eligible for GIS at 65, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, that RRSP withdrawal gets added to their countable income. GIS is clawed back at 50 cents for every dollar of income over the threshold. A $20,000 RRSP withdrawal in a year they're otherwise receiving GIS can reduce their supplement payments by up to $10,000 in the year that follows. That's not a rounding error. A $20,000 roof just became a $30,000 problem. Now run the same scenario with the reserve held in a TFSA. They transfer $20,000 from the TFSA. It counts as zero income, not for tax purposes, not for GIS, not for anything CRA tracks. The RRSP stays exactly where it was. The monthly $500 withdrawal continues untouched. GIS at 65 is completely unaffected. The roof gets fixed, and their retirement plan looks identical to what it did before the first leak showed up. I used to think the 4% rule was the only variable that mattered. Keep the withdrawal rate low enough, and the plan would hold together. I was wrong. The year I watched a client's plan crack because of a furnace replacement, I understood what I'd been missing. The real risk wasn't the withdrawal rate. It was the lump they hadn't planned for. The 4% rule tells you how fast you're spending down your savings. The Lumpy Expense Reserve tells you whether those savings will actually last. Building it sounds simple, and it is. The harder part is accepting that $15,000 to $20,000 of your $150,000 is going to sit in a savings account, earning less than it might in the market. That tension is real, and the next section shows exactly what happens to Dan and Lisa when they decide to skip it. It's year 2 of Dan and Lisa's retirement. They've been withdrawing $500 a month from their RRSP, roughly on plan. Then the market corrects, down 12%. The portfolio has taken a hit. Uncomfortable, but survivable, as long as nothing else changes. Then the roof goes. 2 different paths open from here. Path A, Dan and Lisa have no reserve. They pull $20,000 from the RRSP. The problem isn't just the dollar amount. They're selling investments at a market low, locking in the 12% loss on the shares they have to liquidate. That locked-in loss is gone permanently. It won't come back when the market recovers, because those units were already sold. That $20,000 also counts as taxable income. At a 25% marginal rate, $5,000 goes straight to tax. If they're eligible for GIS at 65, that elevated income year is now on the record, potentially reducing their supplement by thousands in the year that follows at 50 cents for every dollar of countable income. Their monthly withdrawal rate has to increase slightly going forward because the portfolio base is smaller. Depletion accelerates quietly. The roof didn't cost $20,000. Once you add the locked-in market loss, the tax bill, and the long-term drag of compounding on a permanently reduced portfolio, the real cost is significantly higher. Path B, Dan and Lisa built the $20,000 TFSA reserve before they retired. The The contractor's bill arrives. They transfer $20,000 from the TFSA, zero taxable income. The RRSP stays untouched and keeps recovering as the market rebounds. Their $500 monthly withdrawal continues exactly as planned. GIS eligibility at 65 is completely unaffected. 3 months later, you couldn't tell from their retirement plan that anything unusual had happened. That's not a small distinction. When you're managing $150,000 a plan that can absorb a $20,000 shock and come out looking intact is worth far more than any investment return you'd have earned keeping that cash in equities instead of a savings buffer. The Canadian Institute of Actuaries has long documented that retirees who face a major unplanned expense in the first 5 years of retirement carry a significantly higher risk of depleting their savings within 20 years compared to those who don't. The sequence is what matters. A forced, unplanned withdrawal in the early years, when the portfolio is youngest, when there's no long runway left to recover, does damage that average projections never capture. The difference between Path A and Path B is not income, it's not discipline. It's a single decision Dan and Lisa made, or didn't make, before the roof started leaking. And that decision comes down entirely to where they chose to hold their buffer. Let's jump ahead 8 years. Dan and Lisa are now 70. If they took Path A, if they made that unplanned $20,000 withdrawal in year 2, locked in the market loss, and paid the tax on top of it, their RRSP is sitting at roughly $75,000. That number has been declining faster than originally planned because a smaller portfolio requires a larger percentage withdrawal to meet the same monthly expenses. CPP and OAS are covering the floor at this point, but there's almost no cushion left for health costs, dental work, or any real choice about where they live or how they spend their time. They've deferred small home maintenance along the way because the budget had no room for it. Some of those deferred items are now more expensive problems than they would have been. There's no room to help a grandchild with a car or an education cost. A move to a smaller place or a retirement community, if their health changes and they need it, isn't financially within reach. The deeper loss is optionality. They originally had the choice to defer CPP from 65 to 70, which would have increased their monthly payment by 42%, about $320 more per month for life. But they couldn't bridge the 5-year income gap on a $75,000 portfolio without drawing it down too quickly. So they took CPP at 65, locked in the lower rate, and that door closed. If they took Path B, if the $20,000 TFSA buffer absorbed the roof, the RRSP stayed intact, and the market had time to recover, their picture at 70 looks completely different. The RRSP is closer to $130,000 after 8 years of regular withdrawals and market growth. The TFSA buffer was used for the roof, but has been partially rebuilt since. There's actual room in the budget for health costs, for some travel, for modest choices that matter. They had the choice to defer CPP. They could afford the gap. That 42% increase, roughly $320 more per month, every month, for the rest of their lives, is still flowing. I'll be honest with you. When I first started thinking seriously about my own retirement, I didn't budget for lumpy costs either. I was focused on the monthly withdrawal number and forgot that the roof over my head is a real, aging object that will eventually need real money. It took watching someone else's plan break down before I realized I was making the same oversight they were about to make. The difference between these two paths is not dramatic. It's not lavish comfort versus poverty. It's the difference between a retirement that gives you room to adapt to whatever comes up and one that requires everything to go exactly as planned every year. So how do you actually build this reserve when $150,000 is what you have to work with? It's not about cutting the grocery budget. It's about the order you put things in. Building the Lumpy Expense Reserve comes down to 3 steps. None of them require a financial advisor, a new account type, or a complete rethink of your current plan. Step 1. Identify what you're actually planning for. If you own a home, your likely lumpy costs over the next 10 years look something like this. A roof replacement runs $15,000 to $25,000. A new furnace or central air unit runs $8,000 to $12,000. A major car repair or vehicle replacement is $5,000 to $10,000. Dental work your provincial plan doesn't cover. Implants, major crowns, oral surgery can run $4,000 to $8,000 per procedure. And depending on your province, there are prescription costs and specialist visits that fall outside provincial drug plan coverage. You don't need to budget for all of these happening in the same year. You need to plan for at least one of them arriving in any given 2-year window, which is exactly what Statistics Canada's housing data suggests is the baseline reality for Canadian homeowners in their 60s. Step 2. Decide where to hold the reserve. The right location is a TFSA. Withdrawals from a TFSA are completely tax-free and do not count as income for GIS eligibility or OAS clawback purposes. If you pull $20,000 from your TFSA to pay for a roof, CRA doesn't count $1 of it toward your income for that year. Your full GIS entitlement stays intact. The second best option is a high-interest savings account held inside a TFSA. You earn a reasonable return on the cash without putting it at market risk, and the interest stays sheltered from tax. What you want to avoid is holding the reserve inside an RRSP. Any RRSP withdrawal, even a genuine one-time emergency, becomes taxable income for that year. For someone at or near GIS income thresholds, that single withdrawal can reduce GIS payments by 50 cents for every dollar, on top of the income tax owed. A $20,000 furnace from the RRSP can cost $30,000 in real terms once the full tax and GIS consequences are accounted for. Step 3. Fund it. If you're still working at 62 and planning to retire in the next 1 to 2 years, redirect the next 12 to 18 months of savings directly into the TFSA buffer before counting anything else as your retirement portfolio. Fund the reserve first. Whatever is left is your investment base. If you've already retired and your savings are sitting entirely in an RRSP, the path is slower. Redirect 5% to 10% of your annual RRSP withdrawal into the TFSA over 2 to 3 years to build the buffer gradually. The math on that last scenario is worth a moment. Dan and Lisa shift $10,000 from their RRSP into the TFSA over 18 months by redirecting part of an annual withdrawal into savings rather than spending. That $10,000 earns roughly 3% in a TFSA savings account rather than the 7% it might have earned in RRSP equities. The annual difference is about $400. That $400 is their insurance premium, protecting a $150,000 plan against a $20,000 repair that, without the buffer, would cost them closer to $30,000 once the full tax and GIS consequences are added up. $400 a year to keep a $150,000 retirement plan intact. That's the math. You might be thinking you have no TFSA room left, or that your $150,000 is sitting entirely in an RRSP and moving any of it would trigger tax. Those are real barriers, and they're also exactly why most people never build this reserve. That's what the next section deals with. If you want to do one useful thing after watching this, find out how much TFSA contribution room you currently have. If it's at 0 and everything is in your RRSP, drop a comment below, because that's exactly the situation this strategy is designed for. If you've been saving for retirement for years, contributing to your RRSP, building your TFSA, running the numbers, and you've never once included a line for a furnace replacement or a major dental bill, you're not unusual, and you're not being careless. Our brains are genuinely not designed to budget for lumpy, irregular events. When we picture retirement, the image is usually calm and stable, a predictable income, manageable spending, a routine that mostly resembles the previous year's routine. We don't naturally picture the $18,000 repair bill that arrives in month 14. Our mental model of the future smooths out disruptions. It doesn't include the noise. This isn't denial. It's how human brains actually process uncertainty about a future with too many variables to hold at once. There's a name for this pattern: optimism bias. We consistently underestimate the probability of disruptive events happening to us personally, even when we know the statistics apply to most people in our situation. A homeowner in their 60s can look at the Statistics Canada housing data, nod in recognition, and still not include that cost in their own plan, because those repairs feel like they happen to other people's houses, not theirs. For someone with $1 million in savings, a $20,000 surprise repair is an inconvenience. For someone with $150,000, the same repair is a structural event. The bias that costs very little at higher wealth levels becomes genuinely dangerous at this scale. If you've never built a roof replacement or a car into your retirement plan, you're not failing at planning. You're responding the way every human brain responds when it's trying to make peace with a future full of unknowns. The problem isn't your character. The problem is that your plan needs a variable the standard calculator doesn't provide. The mindset shift that helps most people is this. Instead of asking, "Can I afford to set aside $20,000 for a reserve?" turn that question around. "Can I afford not to?" The $400 a year you give up by holding cash in a TFSA instead of equities is the least expensive protection you will ever buy. Not a cost, a shock absorber. I don't know every detail of your situation. Maybe your roof was replaced last year. Maybe your car is practically new. But every retiree I've worked with who left lumpy costs out of the plan regretted it within the first 5 years. The ones who planned for it, they were able to watch the same storm pass without it touching their retirement at all. Let's bring this back to the question Dan and Lisa started with. $150,000 at 62, can it work? The honest answer is yes, not easily, and not if you treat that number as a smooth math problem with predictable spending and steady withdrawals. But it can work if your plan accounts for what every standard calculator quietly ignores. Build a $20,000 lumpy expense reserve. Hold it in a TFSA, separate from your investment portfolio and outside your monthly withdrawal math. Let it absorb the roof replacement, the furnace, the dental surgery, whatever comes first, so your RRSP never has to take a forced withdrawal at the worst possible moment, at the worst possible tax cost, with the worst possible impact on your future GIS eligibility. This isn't a complicated strategy. It's a shift in how you hold one part of your savings. But the difference between doing it and not doing it is the difference between a retirement plan that survives real life and one that only works when everything goes exactly as projected. At Brian's Canadian Retirement Playbook, we don't give you the rosy version of this math. We give you the real numbers, the ones with roof repairs and market corrections and GIS clawbacks built in, because that's the only version of this plan that holds up when real life stops cooperating. If this video changed how you're thinking about your savings, share it with one person you know who owns a home and thinks their retirement is sorted. Because the best plan isn't the one that looks perfect on a spreadsheet. It's the one that can handle a storm. And if you want more Canadian-specific retirement strategies that the standard calculators won't tell you about, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're here every week with the numbers that actually matter.